Hello, this is Ki-hyun Kim. Today I'm going to explain about consumer and corporates on sustainability. So in this class of corporate sustainability, you probably deal with a lot of issues surrounding sustainability from the perspective of corporates. Today I'm going to focus more on consumer part and how it's related to corporate sustainability. Topic will be really interesting for you, not just as a student who study corporate sustainability, but for you as a consumer, for you as a citizen, for you as a stakeholder who witness diverse activity of corporate sustainability these days. Since this topic covers a lot of psychological aspect of consumers regarding corporate sustainability, this will be really practical, and maybe you can think that, this is exactly the way that I think. This is different from my expectation. Or I think this company's efforts on sustainability will have a negative impact or positive impact on customer side. I hope you enjoy the lecture and hope it inspires you think more on customer aspect of corporate sustainability. And hope the only thing that will redeem mankind is cooperation. Quotes from Bertrand Russell. We need to cooperate. This includes not just corporate, but citizens, consumers. Let me start with these questions. Imagine yourself as a chief sustainability officer. How would you deal with sustainability? And second question, as a consumer, how you usually react to corporate sustainability? Please remember these two questions during my presentation. The following contents will inspire to have a diverse perspective and deeper understanding on corporate and consumers. The contents are following. First, I will deal with why consumer matter. Why should we learn about consumers in corporate sustainability? And the second, I will deal with relationship between corporate and customers and consumer sovereignty versus marketing strategy. So there is conflicting views on corporate and consumer relationship. The one side asserts more consumer sovereignty, while the other part asserts more emphasis on marketing strategy. What happens when consumers are active participants in sustainability, which means consumers as independent forces? Second assumption, the contradictory assumption, is that what happens when consumers are subject to the manipulation of companies? The realities are between two extremes, which means that consumers are independent forces, but at the same time, they are subjected to manipulation of companies. So you can think of these two extreme side of viewing the relationship between consumer and corporates, and then you may return to these questions. Imagine yourself as a CSO and how you deal with sustainability when you think consumer as independent forces, or when you think consumer as being manipulated by the company. And as a consumer, how you react to sustainability while you think yourself as independent forces or yourself as easily being manipulated by the company. This is to better understand the reality of business and market society these days. After dealing with these two topics, we'll jump into the third question: how can corporate manage sustainability successfully? First question, why consumer matter? Business, government agencies, and nonprofits play important roles in driving positive changes, acknowledging their responsibility beyond financial return to contribute to systemic solutions. This is what exactly corporates are doing these days for sustainability. But what about consumers? While we emphasize responsibility of corporates, are we emphasizing enough on consumers? The reality is that for sustainability, like you see in this figure, collective efforts of diverse stakeholders are needed. Not just corporates, government, civil organizations, intergovernmental organizations, but at the same time, consumer collective efforts from them are desperately needed to achieve sustainability. Consumption is the end and aim of all economic action. Quote from Adam Smith. For sustainability, individual consumers' lifestyle matters. This is a document from UN, and they argue that consumers' lifestyle change is desperately needed to achieve impact. For example, home energy, transport, food, fashion, waste, and water. Customers' lifestyle have huge impact on carbon emission, which means that If consumer lifestyle in positive direction, actually sustainability can be achieved. The consumer can do their part with corporates. There is a problem of overconsumption and underconsumption. So environmentally unsustainable behaviors and socially unsustainable behaviors of consumers have negative impacts on market society. So international society is calling for consumers to have a fair consumption and to live their lives in more sustainable way. Yes, lifestyle matters. Unfortunately, nowadays we see millennials or Z more into sustainable lifestyle. So for them, environmental, social, and governance issue matters compared to previous generations. This is a positive change. This figure shows that mainly from developed country, still people emit a lot of carbon emissions due to their lifestyle. Again, not just corporates, not just governments, not just nonprofits, but positive changes of consumers are needed to achieve sustainability agenda. Another issue is that the act of buying is actually a vote for an economic and social model. So according to scholars, every buyer determines in some degree the direction of industry. The market is a democracy where every penny gives the right to vote. Everyone who goes into it is casting a vote. I mentioned that consumer lifestyle has a huge impact on society and environment. Let's go into deeper. We may perceive consumption as not just as a consumption, but as an act of voting to decide which society to go, which market system to pursue. We are talking about not just corporate social responsibility, but also consumer social responsibility. Consumer as a citizen. Consumer has a responsibility to evaluate the consequence of their individual purchase, not just corporates and government, consumers. They also need to take a responsible steps. As a consumer citizen, they need to make a responsible action. They need to change their lifestyle in home energy, transport, food, fashion, and waste water, since their act of consumption has dramatic impact on environment and social issues, but also they somehow decide economic system and business model, economic model of our society. Another important factor is that consumers are also citizens and they are also voters in political aspect. Also, they are employees and also investors. When you think about consumer, they also are part of the corporates. They are part of the government. They're part of the investors. So that's why consumer aspect matters. That's why we deal with consumers in corporate sustainability. So far, we have talked about why consumer matters in corporate sustainability. I briefly talked about consumer matters because corporates work together with consumers and consumers' decisions affect carbon emissions, and also it affects our economic model, and it affects industry, it affects corporates, and more importantly, consumers are also citizens and employees, voters, investors, and so on. We now understand the importance of consumers. Now we turn to the next topic of relationship between corporates and consumers in sustainability. There is conflicting views which emphasizes consumer sovereignty, and on the opposite side there is a marketing strategy who emphasizes more corporate power. So it's about power game between consumer and corporates. Why this matter? Because these basic assumptions of how we perceive the relationship between consumer and corporates affect the corporates management, corporate strategy, and the effectiveness of their sustainability initiatives, and how the corporates are perceived by consumers, and so on. These questions are all affected based on this assumption. First view. What happens when consumers are active participants to sustainability, which means that consumers as independent forces and their economic decisions are not influenced by corporates. Okay, consumer sovereignty explains that consumer sovereignty is incompatible with the notion of marketing strategy. Firms are bound to obey the captain's order. Yes, we follow consumers' order. Organizations are continuously adjusting to their offerings in the context of attracting and maintaining customers and developing. So now you see that consumers have more power than corporates, then what happens? Yes, consumers lead the movement. Consumers decide which way to go. Consumers decide whether we pursue sustainability or not. Not corporates, but consumers may order corporates to follow the rule. So based on this assumption, there is consumer movement and activism cases. For example, both culture and policy on DEI and sustainability standpoint, consumers make movement and corporates need to follow. For example, Me Too, Black Lives Matter, Friday for Future, Extinction Rebellion. This kind of consumer movement or civil movement asks or even force companies to follow the rule. So it's not company's decision. Maybe as Chief Sustainability Officer or CEO, you better listen to consumer movement and you better follow. Based on this assumption, there are three different paradigms. The first paradigm is the conflict paradigm, second, radical imagination paradigm, and third, strategic coalition paradigm. Conflict paradigm explains that corporates and consumer fight each other. So there are conflicts. So for sustainability, consumer collective may argue that corporates are not doing enough and they may denounce corporates. They corporates to be changed. The second, radical imagination paradigm sees corporates and consumers somehow through a similar process, so they change at the same time. So corporates and consumer collective go through similar process of changes. The third one is a strategic coalition paradigm, which sees corporates and consumer collective work together. They form a strategic coalitions to achieve sustainability. All the three paradigms are based on consumer sovereignty. So consumers decide independent of corporate influence or industry influence. So conflict paradigm explains that activists intentionally work to mobilize resources to legitimate new ways of doing business, which can disrupt the market. It explains that consumers have conflict with existing model of company and they ask for changes. So this kind of consumer movement make corporates to be changed. Otherwise, stable or formidable markets come into experience shocks from the action of consumers. This is the conflict paradigm. For example, boycott of consumers on Shell spill oil platform, and even Nike in terms of sweatshop labor in decades ago, a consumer movement in this issue led Shell or Nike, big firms, to change their policy, to change their business. Nowadays, we see consumer movement which are in conflicts against companies. You see here rebellion and consumer movement against Volkswagen. Another example would be the consumer movement that I have participated in fashion industry. This is a fashion revolution. People are marching for changes in fashion industry, which has a lot of negative environmental impact.